The 23rd of July, 1943. A persistent drizzle, so typical of an English summer, slicked the tarmac of the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough. Here, in the heart of Britain's most advanced aeronautical research facility, the air hung heavy with the smells of high-octane aviation fuel, hot oil, and damp soil. Amidst the purposeful hum of Merlin and Griffon engines being tested to their limits, Technical Sergeant Robert Clayton of the RAF's Air Technical Intelligence Branch stood before an alien machine, a predator caged far from its natural hunting grounds. Before him, captured and silent, sat a Focke-Wulf FW-190. What he was seeing, or rather, what he wasn't seeing, left him utterly and profoundly baffled. For 2 long, bloody years of the air war over Western Europe, this single German fighter had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the skies. The Focke-Wulf 190 was not merely another combat aeroplane, it was a revolution forged in steel and powered by a brutal radial engine, a machine so formidable it had forced the Allies to question, and then rebuild, every tenet of their aerial doctrine. It was known to British pilots by a grimly fitting nickname, the Butcher Bird. The FW-190 had first appeared in combat over the English Channel in August of 1941, a shocking and violent debut. Royal Air Force pilots, flying their superlative Supermarine Spitfires, had until that moment considered themselves the undisputed masters of the European skies. Suddenly, their after-action reports began to describe an impossibility, a German radial-engined fighter that outclimbed them, outdived them, and could outrun them in a shallow descent. It possessed a roll rate that was simply astonishing and a structural integrity that allowed it to absorb punishment that would have torn a Spitfire apart. Most terrifyingly, its firepower was concentrated and devastating. General Lieutenant Adolf Gorland, the Luftwaffe's charismatic commander of fighters, had flown an early model of the FW-190 in May of 1941. His assessment was as direct as it was lethal for the Allied airmen who would soon face it. "It's like trading a Volkswagen for a Porsche," he had declared with chilling enthusiasm. "The FW-190 makes an average pilot an ace." The raw numbers supported his claim. At the heart of the beast was the BMW 801, a magnificent 14-cylinder, twin-row radial engine that produced a staggering 1,700 horsepower. This powerplant propelled the FW-190 to speeds approaching 685 km per hour at an altitude of 6,000 meters. Its armament was a symphony of destruction. 4 mm 17 machine guns were supplemented by a pair of devastating mm 151-20 cannons, each firing 20 mm shells, mounted in the wing roots. Some variants, designed as bomber destroyers, added 2 further cannons in the outer wings, creating a wall of lead and high explosives. Yet, as Clayton was beginning to suspect as he stared into the opened engine cowling, the true, game-changing advantage of the Focke-Wulf 190 was not found in its published performance statistics. It lay hidden within its engineering, a secret the Allies would not fully comprehend until a stroke of incredible fortune delivered one of the formidable fighters directly into their hands, completely intact. That stroke of fortune had a name: Oberleutnant Armin Faber. In June of 1942, during a frantic melee over the southern coast of England, Faber, a pilot of Jagdgeschwader II, committed a fatal navigational error. After a swirling, disorienting dogfight against a squadron of Spitfires, he found himself alone, low on fuel, and lost. In the heat and confusion of combat, with the coastline of Britain laid out below him, he mistook the Bristol Channel for the English Channel. Instead of turning south towards his base in occupied France, he flew north. Believing he was safely over friendly territory, he brought his FW-190A3 down for a perfect landing at RAF Pembrey in South Wales. The moment his wheels touched the Welsh runway, Faber had inadvertently handed the Allies the single greatest intelligence prize of the air war. The capture of Faber's FW-190 was immediately classified as a top priority war secret. The aeroplane was discreetly transported under armed guard and heavy tarpaulin to Farnborough, the one place in Britain with the expertise to dissect its secrets. The first British pilot entrusted with flying the captured Butcher Bird was the legendary Group Captain Eric Winkle-Brown, the chief naval test pilot assigned to Farnborough. His preliminary report, delivered in his typically understated but firm Scottish accent, sent a chill through the Air Ministry. The controls are extraordinarily light and precise, Brown stated to a panel of grim-faced engineers and senior officers. Cockpit visibility is excellent, a marked improvement on our own types. The engine response is instantaneous. Gentlemen, I regret to inform you that this aircraft is superior to the Spitfire Mark V in virtually every respect, save for its turning circle. Over the following weeks, Group Captain Brown flew Faber's FW-190 in 47 different test sorties. Each flight revealed new, unsettling advantages of the German design. He pitted it against every frontline Allied fighter, methodically mapping its strengths and weaknesses. But the ultimate discovery, the secret that explained the FW-190's profound tactical superiority, would not be made in the sky. It would be unearthed on the hangar floor by Technical Sergeant Robert Clayton, a senior mechanic whose hands held 12 years of intimate experience with the intricacies of radial engines. Clayton was no ordinary grease monkey. Before the war, he had honed his craft on the big American radials, the Wright Cyclones and Pratt & Whitney twin Wasps that powered the burgeoning civil airliners. He knew every component, every system, every frustrating limitation of the conventional radial engines of the day. He understood the delicate ballet a pilot had to perform with his controls to keep the complex machinery operating at peak performance without tearing itself apart. When he began the methodical disassembly of the BMW 801 from the captured Focke-Wulf, he expected to find advanced, yet fundamentally recognizable, German engineering. Instead, he found something that defied everything he knew about the design of combat aircraft engines. The entire engine management system was a closed loop. The pilot, it seemed, had almost no direct control over the engine's most critical functions. Clayton traced the fuel lines, the ignition wiring, the linkages for the supercharger and the propeller. He found that they all terminated at a single, unassuming metal box, a device of breathtaking complexity. It was a mechanical computer the Germans called the Kommandogerät, literally, the command device. Clayton and his team carefully removed the Kommandogerät and brought it to a cleanroom workshop. Piece by painstaking piece, he began to disassemble it. It was a masterpiece of precision mechanical engineering, a clockmaker's nightmare. 72 individual components worked in perfect, intricate synchronization. There were precisely machined cams, calibrated springs, delicate pressure-sensitive diaphragms, and a labyrinth of valves, all interconnected by a complex system of rods and levers. This single device took inputs from the engine's temperature, atmospheric pressure, engine revolutions, and automatically controlled the fuel mixture, the ignition timing, the supercharger gear selection, and the propeller pitch. The consequence of this was revolutionary. A Spitfire pilot, deep in the chaos of a dogfight, was a frantic juggler. One hand was on the control column, the other darted between a forest of levers, the throttle, the propeller pitch control, the fuel mixture lever, the supercharger switch, the radiator flap controls. He had to constantly divide his attention between flying and fighting the enemy, and managing the complex, temperamental Merlin engine. A moment's inattention, a mistake with the mixture, could flood the engine and cause it to cut out. Pushing the propeller pitch too far could cause the engine to over-rev and tear itself to pieces in seconds. Allowing the temperature to creep into the red could lead to a catastrophic failure. The pilot of the FW-190, by contrast, had only one lever to worry about, the throttle. He pushed it forward for more power, he pulled it back for less. That was it. The Kommandogerät did everything else, flawlessly and instantaneously, freeing the pilot's mind to focus on a single, lethal task, destroying his opponent. It was not merely a convenience, it was a decisive tactical advantage that gave a German pilot a cognitive edge in the life-or-death calculus of aerial combat. Clayton spent weeks documenting every detail of the system. He created precise measurements, drafted intricate technical diagrams, and took photographs of every single component. His final report, classified most secret, was a bombshell. It was immediately distributed to the highest levels at Rolls-Royce, Bristol, Napier, and every other Allied engine manufacturer. But discovering a secret and replicating it were two entirely different propositions. The German Kommandojurat was the result of more than 5 years of dedicated development by BMW's finest mechanical engineers. The Allies rushed to create their own versions, but all the initial prototypes failed. The mechanisms were too complex for them to manufacture reliably, too prone to failure in the harsh environment of a vibrating piston engine, and far too costly to produce on the mass scale the war demanded. While Allied engineers struggled, the FW-190 continued to exact a terrible toll. During the Great Daylight bombing raids over Germany in 1943, the American B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators were savaged by waves of FW-190s, now armed with air-to-air rockets and heavy 30mm cannons. The losses were staggering, threatening the entire strategic bombing campaign. Luftwaffe pilots revered their mount, calling it the best workhorse in their arsenal. It was stable, predictable, and utterly lethal. An average pilot in an FW-190 could confidently engage a superior pilot in a Spitfire and have a very real chance of victory. The Allied response, when it came, was twofold. First, new fighters were designed specifically to counter the Focke-Wulf. The magnificent British Hawker Tempest and the superlative American P-51D Mustang, the latter fitted with a license-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, finally met and, in most respects, surpassed the FW-190's performance. Second, there was a gradual adoption of more automated engine management systems. These were not as sophisticated as the German Kommandojurat, but they were significant improvements over the fully manual controls of the early Allied fighters. Rolls-Royce developed an automatic mixture control system for the later versions of the Merlin engine. Pratt & Whitney implemented automatic supercharger controls on the powerful R2800 double Wasp that equipped the rugged P-47 Thunderbolt. These systems didn't eliminate the pilot's workload entirely, but they reduced it significantly, allowing them more time to focus on the battle. After the war, the aviation historian Richard Smith would write, "The Kommandojurat of the BMW 801 represented a fundamentally different design philosophy." The German engineers understood that modern air warfare required the pilot to concentrate on tactics, not on engine management. The Allies eventually adopted this philosophy, but they were late to the game. The FW-190 itself continued to evolve throughout the war. The high-altitude FW-190D9 variant, known as the Dora to its pilots, was equipped with an inline Junkers Jumo 213 engine. It was considered by many Allied pilots to be the finest piston-engined fighter produced by any nation during the conflict. The American P-51 ace Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer, who flew against the Doras over Germany in early 1945, declared, "The Dora was fast, deadly, and flown by desperate professionals. Every engagement with them was a serious affair." By the war's end, Germany had produced over 20,000 FW-190s in all its variants. They served as air superiority fighters, fighter bombers, night fighters, and bomber destroyers. They fought on every front, from the searing deserts of North Africa to the frozen tundra of the Soviet Arctic. Technical Sergeant Robert Clayton, the quiet mechanic who had first dismantled the captured FW-190 and laid its greatest secret bare, continued his work in technical intelligence for the duration of the war. After VE Day, his unique expertise was immediately sought by Rolls-Royce. There, he applied the principles he had learned from the German Kommandojurat to the development of fuel control systems for Britain's first generation of jet engines. The original BMW 801, with its revolutionary command device, was never directly surpassed by an equivalent Allied system during the war. It was simply overwhelmed, flown out of the skies by the sheer mass of enemy fighters whose engines were good enough, flown by pilots who were brave enough. It was a stark lesson that sometimes, the very best technology doesn't win the war. But it always changes the way future wars are fought. The enduring legacy of the Kommandojurat lives on today, in the sophisticated, computerized full-authority digital engine control, FADEC, systems of every modern military aircraft. From an F-15 Eagle to an F-35 Lightning II, no pilot manually manages fuel mixture or supercharger settings. They concentrate solely on tactics. The engineers at BMW understood this principle in 1939. Robert Clayton and the Allies learned it the hard way in 1942. And the world of aviation was